The Ithorian admiral's last gurgled screams echoed through the command deck as his scaly throat collapsed under Russell Mason's armored grip, green blood pooling on the floor. Mason didn't know it yet, but unleashing humanity's secret mind control weapon would be an act the cruel Ithorian Empire came to regret more than any other in its wicked history. Mere hours earlier, Mason had strode down the dimly lit corridors of the human starship Dauntless, face etched with concern. In the secure briefing room, Admiral Kovacs and Dr. Elias Richter waited, the gravity of the situation palpable. "The Ithorians have launched an all-out assault on Zanar Prime," Kovacs stated bluntly. "The colony's defenses are failing. If we don't halt their advance, millions of civilians will be slaughtered." Richter leaned forward, his voice low. "There's more. An ancient alien artifact lies beneath Zanar Prime's surface, one we've been studying in secret. It's a mind control device of immense power. If the Ithorians claim it, they'll be unstoppable." Mason listened intently, his jaw clenched tight. The stakes couldn't be higher. "That's not the worst of it," Richter continued. "I've uncovered the truth. The Ithorians are already under the artifact's control, enslaved to its malevolent creators, and those creators are now stirring from their ancient slumber." As Kovacs grimly ordered Mason to lead a desperate mission to secure the artifact, Richter offered a final, chilling warning. "If those beings awaken fully," he whispered, "the galaxy will face a horror unlike any we've ever known. This is our last chance. If you fail, humanity falls." The words hung heavy in the air as Mason turned to leave, the weight of the mission bearing down upon him. The fate of humanity itself now rested on his shoulders. Mason and the Wraiths moved with a swift purpose, boarding their stealth dropship and launching towards Zanar Prime. The ship cut through the void, engines straining as they pushed to their limits. As the planet grew larger in the view screen, a sickening sight came into focus. The Ithorian fleet hung in orbit like a swarm of locusts, raining destruction upon the planet's surface. Cities crumbled under the onslaught, reduced to rubble and ash. Pillars of smoke rose from the ruins, the screams of the dying carried away on the wind. Mason clenched his fists, a cold fury burning in his chest. The Ithorians would pay for this slaughter. His hatred for the vile aliens grew with each passing moment. Without warning, a massive Ithorian dreadnought swiveled its cannons towards the dropship. Plasma blasts tore through the hull, alarms shrieking in protest. The ship lurched, trailing fire and debris as it plunged towards the planet's surface. Mason braced himself against the bulkhead, the deck bucking beneath his feet. His squad held on for dear life, the ship shaking itself apart around them. With a bone-jarring impact, the dropship slammed into the ground, metal screeching as it tore itself to pieces. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of escaping gases and the crackle of flames. Mason pulled himself from the twisted wreckage, his body battered but unbroken. His men emerged behind him, bloodied but alive. As they gathered their wits, an eerie quiet settled over the battlefield. The Ithorian bombardment had ceased, the alien ships descending towards a distant mountain range. A cold dread gripped Mason's heart. The Ithorians had found the artifact. He signaled to his squad, and they set off across the war-ravaged landscape, picking their way through the rubble of shattered buildings. The mountains loomed ahead, a foreboding presence on the horizon. As they drew closer, the sound of weapons fire echoed through the ruins. Pockets of Ithorian ground troops emerged, engaging the Wraiths in fierce skirmishes. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the battlefield, searing the air with their passage. Mason and his men fought with a cold precision, cutting down the aliens with ruthless efficiency. But as they pushed deeper into enemy territory, an unsettling wrongness pervaded the air. The Ithorians moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, their eyes vacant and soulless. It was as if they were mere puppets dancing to the tune of an unseen master. A creeping unease settled over the Wraiths as they pressed forward, the weight of their mission bearing down upon them. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and they could not afford to fail. Mason and the Wraiths pressed onward, the looming peaks of the mountains drawing ever closer. The The weight of their mission hung heavy upon them, the fate of humanity resting in their battle-worn hands. As they reached the base of the mountains, a glint of metal caught Mason's eye. Nestled into the rock face, a hidden door stood ajar, its edges jagged and torn. The Ithorians had been here. Mason signaled to his squad, and they approached with caution, weapons at the ready. Hacking their way inside, the Wraiths found themselves in a dimly lit corridor, the air thick with the stench of death and decay. As they pushed deeper into the facility, a horrifying sight unfolded before them. Row upon row of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a human in varying states of mutation. Their bodies were warped and twisted, their faces contorted in silent screams of agony. Mason felt bile rise in his throat as he realized the true extent of the Ithorians' depravity. They had been using human captives as test subjects, guinea pigs in their twisted quest to unlock the secrets of the artifact. The depths of their cruelty knew no bounds. As they picked their way through the macabre chamber, a movement caught Mason's eye. Amidst the pods, a lone figure stirred, his eyes wide with terror. Mason approached cautiously, his weapon lowered. "Easy there, we're not going to hurt you. What's your name?" The young man swallowed hard, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Caleb, my name is Caleb." Mason helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as he stumbled forward. Caleb's eyes darted around the room, a haunted look etched upon his face. "The Ithorians," he whispered. "They're not in control. They're just pawns, their minds enslaved by something far worse." Mason felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean? Who's controlling them?" Caleb's voice trembled as he spoke. "The Xenos. An ancient race of psionic beings, they're the ones behind all of this. They seek to reclaim their lost technology, to reassert their dominance over the galaxy." He pointed a shaking finger towards the far end of the chamber. "The artifact, it's here. And the Xenos, they're already awakening. I can feel their consciousnesses stirring within it." Mason knew they had to act fast. If the Xenos were allowed to fully awaken, the consequences would be unthinkable. He turned to his squad, his voice low and urgent. "We have to reach the artifact before it fully activates. Caleb, can you lead us to it?" The young man nodded, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "Follow me." He led them deeper into the facility, guiding them through a labyrinth of dark corridors. The air grew colder with each step, a sense of unease settling over the group. Suddenly an alarm blared overhead, the sound deafening in the confined space. Mason cursed under his breath. The Ithorians had breached the perimeter. He signaled to his squad, and they took up defensive positions, their weapons trained on the entrance. Seconds later, the first wave of Ithorian soldiers poured into the facility, their eyes blank and their movements jerky, like marionettes on invisible strings. The Wraiths opened fire, the cramped corridors becoming a blood-soaked kill zone. Plasma bolts seared the air, the stench of burnt flesh mingling with the acrid smoke. But the Ithorians kept coming, heedless of their losses, driven forward by the implacable will of their Xenos masters. Mason and his dwindling squad were forced to fall back, deeper into the mountain, the artifact their only hope of victory. As they raced through the twisting tunnels, an unnatural darkness seemed to swallow them whole, the air growing thick with a sense of ancient malevolence. Mason felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him, boring into his very soul. The Xenos were aware of their presence. The fate of humanity hung in the balance as the Wraiths pressed on into the heart of darkness, the seconds ticking down to oblivion. The darkness within the mountain seemed to press in on them from all sides as Mason and his few remaining Wraiths descended ever deeper into the tunnels. With each step, the air grew colder, and an unnatural stillness settled over them like a suffocating shroud. Suddenly, the narrow passageway opened up into a vast cavern, its walls stretching up into the shadows above. In the center of the chamber, a towering monolith of alien metal stood like a silent sentinel, its surface pulsing with an eerie, malevolent energy. Mason approached cautiously, his weapon raised, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. Xenos glyphs flickered across the artifact's surface, their meaning lost to time, but their power unmistakable. The air around the monolith thrummed with an unseen force, a tangible presence that set Mason's teeth on edge. Behind him, Caleb hung back, his face pale and etched with fear. Mason could see the terror in the young man's eyes, a reflection of the dread that gnawed at his own gut. "This is it," Caleb whispered, his voice trembling, "the source of the Ithorian's power." Mason nodded grimly, steeling himself for what was to come. He motioned for his men to take up positions around the artifact, their weapons trained on the pulsing monolith. "Stay sharp," he warned, his voice low and urgent. "We don't know what this thing is capable of." As if in response to his words, a sudden voice spoke directly into their minds, a voice that dripped with ancient cruelty and malice. Mason staggered under the force of it, his head pounding with a searing pain. "Foolish mortals," the voice hissed, its tone mocking and filled with contempt. "You think you can oppose the might of the Xenos? We have slumbered for eons, gathering our strength, waiting for the day when we would reclaim what is rightfully ours." Mason gritted his teeth, fighting back against the alien presence that clawed at his mind, seeking to dominate his will. He could feel the Xenos' power, a vast and terrible force that threatened to overwhelm him. Around him, his men were faring far worse. One by one they fell to their knees, clutching their heads and screaming in agony, as the Xenos' influence tore through their minds like a raging inferno. Mason watched in horror as his loyal soldiers succumbed to the alien control, their eyes glazing over as they turned their weapons upon him. With a heavy heart, Mason was forced to gun them down, each shot a searing agony that tore at his soul. His men, his brothers in arms, reduced to mere puppets of the Xenos' will. Only Caleb remained unaffected, his mind somehow shielded from the alien onslaught. Together they approached the artifact, determination etched upon their faces. They had to destroy it, to end the Xenos threat once and for all. But as they drew near, a final, terrible revelation awaited them. The Xenos' voice spoke again, its laughter filled with cruel amusement. "You fools," it sneered. "The artifact is not just a tool, it is a conduit, a gateway through which we can manifest in your pitiful realm, and you have played right into our hands." Mason's blood ran cold as the realization dawned upon him. The Xenos had been waiting for this moment, biding their time until a species foolish enough to unlock the secrets of the artifact would serve as their unwitting pawns. The monolith began to pulse with an even greater intensity, cracks appearing in its surface, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. Mason stumbled back, his eyes wide with horror, as he realized that something was attempting to break through from the other side. The voice laughed again, a sound that chilled him to his very core. The Xenos were coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. With a deafening crack, the artifact split open. A nightmarish entity emerged, a Xenos, its form a twisted fusion of organic and metallic components. It towered over Mason and Caleb, its eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. The cavern shook with the force of the Xenos' psychic presence. Mason felt blood trickling from his nose as the creature's mind pressed against his own. He raised his weapon to fire, but the Xenos was too quick. It lashed out with a telekinetic blast, sending Mason flying backwards. His gun clattered uselessly to the ground. Caleb, however, stood his ground. His eyes locked with the Xenos. He began to chant in an alien tongue, his words resonating with an unearthly power. The Xenos faltered, its form flickering as Caleb's chant grew louder. Mason watched in amazement as Caleb's body began to glow. Tendrils of energy snaked from his fingertips, enveloping the Xenos. The creature screamed, a sound that threatened to shatter Mason's sanity, but Caleb did not relent. With a final, triumphant shout, Caleb unleashed a blinding burst of psychic energy. The Xenos exploded in a shower of metallic shards and ichor. The cavern fell silent. Mason staggered to his feet, his mind reeling. Caleb stood amidst the remains of the Xenos, his body still glowing with residual energy. He turned to Mason, a sad smile on his face. "I'm not entirely human," Caleb revealed. "I'm a descendant of a long-lost offshoot of humanity that evolved psychic abilities. My people were the ones who originally sealed the Xenos away, sacrificing themselves to protect the galaxy. With the Xenos defeated, Caleb's purpose was complete." Mason watched as Caleb's form began to fade, his physical body dissipating into motes of light. As he vanished, Caleb's voice echoed in Mason's mind, a final warning. "The galaxy is still in danger. The Xenos were merely the vanguard of a far greater threat. The true masterminds behind the artifact still lurk in the shadows, and they will not rest until all of humanity is enslaved or exterminated." Mason was left alone in the cavern, the weight of this revelation heavy on his shoulders. He knew that the war was far from over, and that humanity must prepare for the battles to come. With a heavy heart, he activated his comlink and contacted Admiral Kovacs. His voice was grim as he relayed the events that had transpired. The Wraiths may have fallen, but their sacrifice would not be in vain. Mason vowed to honor their memory by fighting on no matter the cost. For in the face of an implacable enemy, surrender was not an option. Humanity must stand together, or face extinction at the hands of an ancient and terrible. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.